All right, I had a motive for going first because then I can relax and listen to Dylan and Rebecca, who are two wonderful writers, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. Um, my novel Cementville is a multi-voiced narrative, and the passage I'm going to read tonight is in the voice of 13-year-old Maureen, who in this passage, Maureen Jewell, her family has just been surprised by the return of the sudden return of her brother, who volunteered for the Army and went to Vietnam. So it's summer of 1969. It's in the rural South, and in addition to her brother Billy's return, this is the same day that the bodies of 7 National Guardsmen have come home from war. So it's a late summer afternoon. A summer storm has just knocked out the electricity in the valley. The father, Mr. Jewell, is Willis. Catherine is the mother. And so it's raining hard, and there's a knock at the door, and there stands Maureen's soaking wet brother. They pulled Billy into the hallway as if they were rescuing him from the jaws of some invisible monster set to grab him off the front porch. Then Catherine, Willis, and Maureen stood as still as if a ghost had floated into the house, and they watched Billy pick up the satchel and climb the stairs to his old room. He had not spoken. Without having a chance to stop it, the thought floated into Maureen's head, what if they ripped out his vocal cords? In the kitchen, she sat with her father, waiting and fidgeting. Her mother wiped the counters and scrubbed the sink and folded the tea towel. She rubbed lotion into her hands and took out a pitcher of iced tea and put a tin of oatmeal cookies on the table. Her brother came into the kitchen, more himself in a T-shirt and jeans, except for the flat-top buzz cut that stuck up in little points like the hair on a dog's back after rain. She didn't remember Billy's ears being so big, and Maureen wondered for a second if a mistake had been made, a silent stranger wandering into the wrong house. Before he left, Billy kept his hair long like John Lennon's on the cover of Revolver. Maureen poured this new version of her brother a glass of tea and put an oatmeal cookie on a floured saucer in front of him. "Thanks, Mo," he croaked, like someone who still had vocal cords but hadn't used them in a long time. Their mother said, "I wish I had known you were coming home. I would have made a celebration meal." Catherine had that cheerful upturn in her voice to hide the quivering. Watery globs pooled under her eyelashes, and she held her eyes wide open so nothing would spill out. It was a little scary watching her mother act this way. Maureen chewed her cookie so fast she bit the inside of her cheek. Their father's voice didn't shake when he said, "It's good to have you home in one piece," but his hands did. Maybe he was thinking of the other boys who had also come home, not in one piece. Billy said, "Well, getting out wasn't exactly my idea. I got into a fight. I was drunk. I let some coon have it pretty bad." "Willis Theodore Jewell," Catherine hissed, and Maureen sucked in a breath. She was pretty sure that in the house where she and her brother had grown up, that word got you a whipping you would not soon forget. The Jewells had all watched the news of Selma and the fire bombings. The little dead girls in their church outfits. They had followed the march on Washington together, their whole family, Billy included. Their father's breathing was the loudest sound in the room. Maureen pictured the nose hairs vibrating and wheezing like a gang of tiny old men. Billy said, "Stupid fight, I don't even remember what it was about. Fucker almost didn't make it." Their mother let loose a kind of inside-out sob that sucks all the air in the room. Wait, had her brother really almost killed somebody? Maureen felt on the verge of fainting or bursting out laughing. She didn't know which. Billy said, "Idiot had a heart condition even he didn't know about. Shouldn't even have been in the goddamn Army." He glanced at his father and shoved the half cookie into his mouth at once. Don't worry, I still get my GI. It's a discharge, but it ain't a dishonorable one. Discharge don't mean shit these days anyhow. Discharge doesn't mean, Maureen started to correct, but she couldn't make herself say it's S-H-I-T, not in front of their parents. And ain't, their mother had to be dying 1,000 deaths. Willis stood up. I might have left the windows down on the truck. He went straight out into the storm. Maureen watched through the kitchen window, watched her father disappear into the barn. He was in Korea way back when. Catherine and Billy and Maureen sat there in the kitchen like graveyard statues for an eternity. It was quiet as a tomb and very nearly as dark. They all three jumped when the electricity cut back on and the lights flashed and the refrigerator clicked on with a low, screaming hum, and the radio blared to life. Their mother yanked its plug out of the wall. Maureen was afraid the radio might go flying across the room. But Catherine Jewell was not a woman who threw things. She flicked the lights back off, and they sat in the dark a while longer. Billy pushed away from the table. I'm bushed. Goddamn bus must have got a crick in my neck. Their mother shot up from her chair and stood over him, an enlarged version of herself. Filth will not be tolerated in this house. You are my son. She stopped. Her nostrils flared out, scary. And you will use the English language as you were taught. Then her body telescoped down to its normal size. She pulled out a roast and set the oven to 325 degrees and began peeling potatoes. Maureen sat on her hands. She waited for Billy to whisper something sarcastic so they could share a secret laugh, or raise his eyebrows in that exaggerated way with his eyes bugging out in fake fear at their mother's temper. She waited for him to do any one of the things her brother used to do, anything that would help her be sure it was him. Thank you all. And thanks so much, and thanks to the Center for Fiction for having us here. That's wonderful.
That was fabulous. I'm also really grateful to the center and really, really grateful to all of you for coming out on this yucky night. Thank you. I'm Dylan Landis, and I'm reading from RAINEY ROYAL. RAINEY is a young girl growing up in Greenwich Village in the 1970s on West 10th Street in a townhouse. And she lives there with her father, Howard, who is a raging narcissist and a jazz musician, and his best friend, Gordy, and no mother. Her best friend is Tina. I think that might come up here. RAINEY is 14, just a girl trying to get from the entry hall of the townhouse to her pink room on the 3rd floor when her father, Howard, thumps the sofa in that sit-down, baby way. She stops, rain-soaked, in the foyer. The place is too quiet, not an acolyte in sight. Did he send them upstairs to their own rooms or out for pizza? Usually the 1st floor is packed with young musicians. Some are students, some strays, but Howard Royal only brings home the best. 3 days ago, he found 2 brilliant cellist chicks. Found, thinks RAINEY, like shining orphans. The girls have been ensconced in his bedroom, like he's really gonna jam with cellos. Half the acolytes are guys who supply part-time money and part-time girlfriends and revere Howard in an appropriately oblique manner. When someone new shows up, they say things like, "What's your axe, baby?" But half are girls who play celestial music and give celestial blowjobs and can't believe they get to jam and party and live in the extra bedrooms of, oh my God, Howard Royal. RAINEY hasn't heard the place this silent in centuries. Howard's at one end of the parlor sofa clamping a beer between socked feet and a clarinet between his knees. He's adjusting the reed. "Come here, baby," he says. "Isn't it amazing? We're alone." On West 10th Street, alone means 3 people, RAINEY, her father, and Gordy, who lounges on the far sofa arm, refractive as a patch of snow, from his long milk-colored hair to his alabaster hands. His jeans are white too, and he parks a damp white Ked on the upholstery. Gordy Vine is not and never has been an acolyte. He is a horn player and the best musical technician in the house. Even Howard says it. But Howard has the charisma. Gordy claims to be albino, but his eyes are green. He pretends to be unaware of Rainey by keeping his head down. He pretends he is not getting sidewalk crud on the brocade. He pretends to edit penciled notes in a spiral-bound score. He turned 39 last month. Rainey shifts in the foyer. What? She holds her arms out to show the damage she will do the upholstery. I'm soaking wet. She regrets this instantly. Gordy's attention, like a draft from a threshold, wafts toward her. He doesn't even have to raise his head. Howard blows on the clarinet's mouthpiece, looks puzzled, and says, "Sounds like fish frying." Not much about her father's jazz makes sense to Rainey. "Get your shoe off Lala's sofa," she says. Lala is Howard's mother. She owns the house, but she lives in an old folks' home uptown. Some days, Rainey can talk to Gordy any way she wants. Gordy smiles. The Ked remains. "Rainey," he says softly. Even his voice sounds albino. Rainey thinks of white plaster walls licked by the painter's brush. "I sent the acolytes out to collect sounds," says Howard, as if sounds were lost quarters that winked from gutters. "Sit, daughter." She drops her pack, collaborates noisily with a folding chair in the parlor, and sits on it backward while Howard watches with pleased amusement. She smells his body oil, sandalwood. "That school psychologist called again today," he says, "but I think she's on the wrong track. What do you think?" Rainey flinches and looks to the ceiling cherubs for strength. The ceiling cherubs are 3 plaster angels who cavort around a trio of bare bulbs. Their axe used to be the chandelier, but last month Sotheby's Park Burnett took it away. The house is shedding its sweetest parts like lost earrings. In return, electricity keeps humming, pizzas keep arriving, and Rainey keeps going to Urban Day. "Are we getting a new chandelier?" "Do you know why the school psychologist called again?" "No." Rainey stares off into the kitchen, willing the refrigerator to disgorge a glass of milk. "I think you do." "She's full of shit. Can I go now?" "Look at me, daughter." Howard smiles as if indulging her. It's important to be candid about these things. Gordy's not looking at her is now so intense he might as well shine flashlights in her eyes. Howard and the smile persist. "So tell us why the school psychologist is talking about you engaging with the male teachers." The school psychologist always peels and eats an orange while she and Rainey talk. The scent comes back to Rainey in a rush. It is the scent of denial, the innocence that slides over her when Florence, the psychologist, asks how she feels about her mother, her father, the torments she dreams up for that Levinson girl. Extricating herself gracefully from a straddled folding chair could be problematic. "Screw you." She knocks over the metal chair as she stands and elbows one of the new cellos, so she barely has to hear her father say under the clatter, "Oh, you can do better than your old dad." Thank you.
All right, hi. So I'm Rebecca Makkai. This is Music for Wartime. This is the first reading from it, and not really the first, well, the first since it's been out. So I'm going to read to you. First of all, thank you, Center for Fiction. Thank you guys for coming out in the rain. Seriously, that's amazing. And Paulette put this all together, and she deserves a lot of credit for this. I really appreciate her doing that. I'm going to read to you from a story called "Couple of Lovers on a Red Background." And it's sort of a love story. I've been calling him Bach so far, at least in my head. But now that he's started wearing my ex-husband's clothes and learned to work the coffee maker, I feel it's time to call him Johann. I said it out loud once when I needed him to get off the couch before the super came up, but he didn't respond. He went to the vacuum closet only because I practically carried him. No easy task pushing someone so big and sweaty, even with the weight he's lost since he got here. I would take him out for some real German food. But if there is one thing I've learned from the movies about caring for transplanted historical people, it's never to take them out in public among the taxis and police and department store mannequins. I've kept the curtains closed and the TV unplugged, but I did introduce him to the stereo so he'd have something to do when I'm gone. I'm proud of how I did it. I dug my Angel music box out and played it for him. He seemed familiar, so I pointed back and forth between the Angel box and the CD player, then put on some Handel. He was not at all scared, and now he is pushing buttons and changing discs like he was raised on Sony. At first, I only let him have Baroque, but we've been moving up in history. He's fond of Mozart. For some reason, though, Tchaikovsky makes him giggle. When I played him Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, I thought he was going to wet the couch. 5 minutes later, he went to the piano and played the main part from memory, busted out laughing at certain phrases. If such a thing is possible, he played it sarcastically. He has a laugh, incidentally, like you'd expect from a pot-smoking 13-year-old. On the phone the other day, my mother said, "Who's that laughing over there? At least she thinks I'm dating again." He doesn't seem to remember living in the piano. He never lifts the lid to look inside, which I would do if I'd lived there 10 days. The morning he came, I was in my sweats playing his minuet in G, the one you know if you ever took lessons. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I was playing pretty damn well, despite a few glasses of wine, when I felt something stuck in my throat. Since my hands were busy, I didn't cover my mouth, just turned my head and coughed something up. I think I passed out then, although I don't remember waking. There's a bit of time I can't account for. I remember being in the kitchen later. I remember making tea. The next day I heard scratching inside the piano and I figured I had mice again. The piano's an old upright, a cheap Yamaha that Larry, my ex, bought used right out of college. I thought, if mice eat the insides, it's not the worst thing, an excuse to get something nicer. The scratching kept on almost a week, and every time I hit a note, something would scurry against the strings. One morning, I was eating breakfast, getting my papers ready for the condo I was going to show, and the lid of the piano lifted up. I'm not a big screamer. In fight or flight situations, I tend to pick option C, freeze. I just sat there paralyzed and outclimbed what I can only describe as a small troll. It was about a foot tall, and it moved so fast I didn't even notice its clothes or hair. It ran smack into the side of the couch, then out to the middle of the floor, where it scampered in circles. I held my papers in front of my legs like a shield, chased it into the closet, and shut the door. Assuming it was a hallucination, I tried to put it out of my mind because I had 20 minutes to find a cab, get across the city, and tell the Lindquists why they should invest their $800,000 in a walk-up with non-perpendicular hallways. It's possible that I also wanted an excuse to get the hell out of there. It's a beauty, I told the Lindquists, very raw and so close to street level it's almost earthy. But Mrs. Lindquist tapped her nails on the mantel and said it didn't feel like home. I was sure everything would be better when I got back and saw the empty closet. I reminded myself I'd been dehydrated, that I should drink more than just alcohol and coffee. But when I got home, I found my guest fully grown, just a little shorter than me, and sleeping on the couch. I had no idea who he was at first. All I could tell was old, grimy, European, too much lace at the cuffs for my taste. He doesn't have a wig, like in his pictures, just messy, reddish hair. But after I stared at him for half an hour, he woke up and walked to the piano and started to play. Just scales at first, like he was getting used to it, and then he launched into a couple of those inventions that drove me crazy in school. So I looked up Bach online, and it's definitely him. The exact same fleshy cheeks, the same dark eyes pinched between thick brows. I decided I should look respectable in the presence of a genius, so I started freshening my face every day in the cab on the way home, not just the way out. I bought a whole pack of razors at Duane Reade and began shaving my legs again. I introduced Johann to soap and deodorant, and the other day while I was gone, he finally changed his clothes. Now he's wearing Larry's gray flannel shirt and old corduroys. He looks so normal. Sometimes I glance up and forget it's not just Larry sitting there drinking a beer. Which is all to say, he's not bad looking. It makes you think. Technically, he's a married man, But even more technically, his second wife died 300 years ago. And it's not as if I can go out on dates now and leave him alone, and I can't bring anyone back here. Then there's this. He had 20 children. He's clearly very fertile. And any child of his would be a musical genius. His sons certainly were, and his daughters might have been, given the chance. Could that be the reason this happened? So that I can have his daughter and give her a decent shot at life? The question, then, is how to seduce an 18th century German. That's where I'll stop.
Are we?
Good, okay.
Can you hear us? Okay.
Excellent. So we're going to talk to each other, I guess, for a few minutes before we talk to all of you. And we thought that one of the things we would do is maybe start by each talking for just a minute about this particular book, or other books too, but how they came to be in the publication, the path to publication, right? Does that sound?
Okay.
And I think Paulette should go first.
All right. Well, it's so good to see all of your faces out there. There are people I know and admire and just have loved for a long time, and it's wonderful. So, oops.
Oh,
Let me see if I can clip you.
So about 10 years ago, I joined a writing group. I was in...
Project. I can't do it.
We have some assistants.
Just
I
talk
joined
into
a
it like a
writing
tiny-
group in Boulder, Colorado, where I lived. And just make motions if it's not loud enough. And you know, I was just writing. I had always written, but I don't even know why I joined that writing group, but I wanted to maybe push things a little bit more. And so I was just writing these little vignettes, things that came to me, and I didn't have any intentions for them. I just was thoroughly enjoying myself. And the writing group started saying, well, you know, maybe you're working on a longer piece. Some of these feel connected. You know, do these people know each other? Do they live in the same place? Maybe you're writing something much longer. And then they started sort of whispering the word novel. And I couldn't think about that. I just, one of the women said, why don't you try just maybe putting some connective tissue between this vignette and this vignette? And so I started doing that, and you know, before I knew it, I had 20 pages and 40 pages. And then I realized I was actually writing about the place I grew up. It's not called Cementville, but there is a place in Kentucky where I grew up that actually suffered some of the things that are referenced in the book, some of the things during the Vietnam War. And so I was young then, and just sort of that, you know, that adolescent, absorbent mind that just looks at everything that's going on, doesn't quite understand everything, but is trying to piece it all together. So that was kind of the genesis of it, and you know, and then people just kept encouraging me, and so there you have it.
And here we are.
That's how it began.
My path to publication originally was actually very rough, and is probably the answer to a different question. But how RAINEY ROYAL got published. I wrote originally a collection of linked short stories, Normal People Don't Live Like This, and RAINEY appeared in the first story or chapter as the bully of a girl named Leah Levinson, who was the main character of the book. And I showed the manuscript when I was done to my mentor, this novelist Jim Crusoe in LA, and he said, you really need another RAINEY story to balance it out. And at the time, that book took me 5 years to write, and I thought, no, what I really need is a published book. So we kind of rushed the process, and we got the book published without another RAINEY story. And I went on all these readings, and readers in bookstores would say to me, is there going to be another Rainey book? Because she's fabulous. And I thought, no, actually, there's not going to be another Rainey book because I'm going to write about Typhoid Mary. I have become obsessed with Typhoid Mary. I wanted to write a historical novel. I had done all this research on her. I found out that she genuinely believed that she was not sick and could not transmit disease and had reason to believe that. And I spent 4 years on this project. I got a grant. And after 4 years, I realized I could not write that book. So I took a break and I wrote in one Rainey story, and I showed this massive Mary material and the one Rainey thing to someone I trusted, and he said, Rainey. I'm gonna write Rainey. And that's how that book came to be.
Wow. I should probably because you just heard a really weird story, I should probably explain myself, and then I'll talk about the book, why I would write about having an affair with Bach. That particular story, I wrote that story a really long time ago, although then in putting it into the collection, it got sanded over and changed around quite a lot. But there was a story, my father kind of got me thinking really anachronistically as I was growing up, where he would just, we'd be listening to certain music in the car, like the Beatles or something, and he'd be like, what would Mozart think of this? He has like a thick Hungarian accent. What would Mozart think of this? What would Mozart think of this? And it was a serious question. It wasn't like Mozart would think this was terrible. It was like, well, no, Mozart might like the Beatles because they're kind of they're kind of structural. And I remember one time we were watching Antony and Cleopatra, the movie, like the Liz Taylor movie, and it's been silence in our house for like 2 hours, and it's like the final battle scene, and from the couch he goes, all they need is one chopper, and the war is over. I'm like, okay, yeah, that would help.